But here's the lunacy of it. They're not contacting them. They're not following them up. So they're not following them up. He's not following them up. And the only chance we've got is that Anita is following them up, right? So, but that's not really of interest to us. The interest to us is to create, and here's the objective. Everything I'm talking to you about now is designed with the ideal of creating prospect flow. What I want every sales operative to know in that real estate business is that we are committed to putting them into listing presentations as often as we can. The ultimate goal is to have them doing a daily listing presentation. The likelihood of that is probably remote, but that's what we're striving towards. We're always striving towards that objective, because I believe a listing salesperson, a real estate sales professional, should be doing a listing presentation every day. I mean, that's really what you do. Yeah. So I don't want them to think that we're being draconian. I don't want them to feel like we're trying to cut across them. We're actually trying to improve their productivity without their intervention. We want to take control of it to create that for them. Now, what's the selfish aspect of that? Well, the incentive for us to do that is that if most of, if not all, of the company generated, most of the incoming active property sellers and listing presentations, if they're company generated, if they're company origin, it makes it profitable for us. So of course the company's got an incentive to do that. All we need you guys to do in some ways is let go. Don't get argumentative, because here's the thing. What would you rather have? Would you rather have 2, solo generated listings, or would you rather have 3 company generated listings? So you don't have to do any of the work to generate them, and you've got 3 listings, or would you rather have 2 solo generated listings that you got to get yourself? I'll take it one step further. Would you rather have half a dozen over a month company generated listings, or the 1 or fucking pizzly 2 that you're currently getting at the moment? And if they look at me and they go, well, how do you know that? It's just because it says here on your fucking stats. That's the most you're doing. So we're trying to actually get it so that your overall productivity increases. To do that, you've got to let go of this prospecting concept. You've got to let go of this ownership thing, and you've got to encourage us to do it, because that means that you don't have to do the prospecting if you allow us to do it. All right. So you ready? We're going to go to school just for a second for the rest of this.
Okay.
All right. So I'm just going to... I've got no idea what happened to that. So I'm just going to have to go over here. Go to Keynote. Oh, it is there. Okay. So what I want to show you is what's actually happening with sellers and how we're missing so many of them inside the intervention. To do that, I've just got to explain this to you. Playing this smack. Sorry. All right. So this is basically the reverse engineering of what property sellers do before we get hold of them. Is that okay?
Yeah.
So first thing is they start with a motive. They decide to move, right? So people don't just wake up one morning and go, I think I'll just go and whack the property on the market with McDowell Real Estate and see how it goes, and then I'll see what happens. And everything starts with a motive. Now, you'll find that salespeople lose sight of this. They lose sight of it with great regularity. One of my favorite questions as a sales team leader on new listings, one of my favorite questions if I'm in a sales meeting and I'm talking about a price reduction, one of my favorite questions if we're talking about a negotiation on a deal that's midstream, the first thing I'll say is, what are the sellers trying to do? And I'll say, what do you mean? Where are they going? What are they trying to do? And they look at me like I fucking have a head. Sometimes the listing salespeople person isn't even aware of that. They're aware of how much money they want. They're aware of the gap between getting that money in place or the fact that they won't bring it down, but they're not aware of what they're trying to do. And so look, the key to getting an understanding of how this whole thing works is starting with the motive, right? So basically what sellers do, it might be a divorce, right? So they look at each other and they say, we don't want to be together anymore. So then they start thinking, okay, so if we sell a house, what's the split going to be? How am I going to survive and you going to survive independently? That could be a question. Or if they want to buy a new house or a bigger house, they're like, well, how much money do we need from this one to go ahead and buy that one with the new loan and all that sort of stuff? In any event, it starts with a motive. And then from the motive, they then start saying, well, how much money do we need or want to satisfy this motive? Now, typically what they do is they overestimate that, to be honest with you. They overestimate how much money they need. The moment they establish that figure, however, the next thing they do is they start looking at the property and they say, what's the property worth? But most of their research is biased because they're looking at it saying, what's it worth in direct correlation to the amount of money we need? You with me?
Yeah.
Now, this is the most fascinating part. Until such time as the property's value is greater than or equal to the amount of money they need, they actually don't want to engage the contact of an agent most of the time. Now, that used to be very different when I started in real estate years ago, because the only place they could source this information was from estate agents. So they involved us in all this research, right? But now, because of the information age, they can get all this information on property value, arrive at their own conclusion without even talking to an agent.
Mm.
So these are the phases they go through, right?
Yeah.
And I hope that this will start to make a lot of sense to you now. So the first phase is what I refer to as the research phase. And this is where they're going to other open houses that are local to theirs, calling up agents and saying, look, I've just seen a sign on one. How much is it? Jumping on the internet. Now, are you ready for this? And if you don't know this, I'd ask you to have a look at it between now and next week. But do you guys get internet inquiries coming in where the inquirer is leaving a return email address, but no mobile phone number?
Yeah.
Think about that.
Mm.
So what is that? In your experience, and look, I know that you haven't done a lot of selling, but if you ask one of the salespeople, have you got any buyers that won't give you their phone number? The answer is no. Buyers always leave phone numbers.
Mm.
Well, if we've got people inquiring off the internet and they're leaving a return email address but no mobile phone number, they're not fucking buyers.
Mm.
They're sellers.
Yeah.
Okay, I have an email that you can send back to those people that more or less says, hello, property researcher. Our statistics show that people who inquire on property and don't leave a mobile phone number usually indicates market research ahead of selling. We understand that you do not want to contact one of our sales professionals at this stage, and we'll keep the contact to a minimum. But we require a verified telephone number in order to supply the information. And while we're at it, we'll give you information on other upcoming listings so you can actually arrive at a price. Mate, all of them send their numbers back and you've just identified all these sellers. So I can show you how to control that.
Awesome.
Yep. All right. So here's the research phase, right? So it goes from about 4 to as long as 12 weeks.
Yeah.
And during this period, most of these sellers, pose as buyers. The reason they pose as buyers is because it's safe. Real estate agents don't follow them up. You're already seeing this. They're not following up the inquiry. At best, you've got Anita following them up. So I say they do it for two reasons. The first reason is that it's safe because the agents aren't going to hassle them about selling.
Yeah.
The second reason is most of our marketing is not centric to sellers. It mostly says, if you're buying, you can come and have a look at this. If you're buying, you can come and have a look at that. So we seek to change that as often as we can. So in most of our marketing, particularly around the property, we say, if you're researching the market ahead of selling, feel welcome to come to our open for inspection. Or if we've just listed a property in bloody this street, if you're researching the market ahead of selling, feel free to give us a call. We'll give you information on this and all of our other pre-release listings. Because we want them to feel comfortable saying, I'm not looking at this to buy, I'm looking at this in comparison to my own because I'm thinking of selling.
Mm.
And but we don't want to smother them when they do that. So all this relates to is what we call the data collection phase. And here's your first frustration point, which amazingly, you just mentioned this morning, right? So the data collection point is what we want to do is centrally locate all of the incoming inquiry. We call it sales inquiry. So the acronym you see up there, sales inquiry log, is written, but it's basically so the acronym is SEL. We want to talk about the SEL, the sales inquiry log. The reason I call it the sales inquiry log and not the buyer inquiry log is because there's plenty of sellers in that inquiry. So we've got to get ourselves away from this idea that anyone inquiring is just a buyer. There's as many, the vast majority of people who buy have actually sold somewhere. And there's a large number of them that are selling within the Rotorua or the greater Rotorua catchment area. So the only insistence I have is that we're collating. This is me. I'm fucking anal about this, Kel. Right? Like I'm just over the top pedantic that we are capturing the name, mobile, and email. The reason for that is these days the integrity of the data is undoubted because when people move, their name doesn't change, their mobile phone number doesn't change, and their email rarely changes. So it's transportable data, which means the integrity is quite high. Now, as crazy as this is going to sound to you, somehow we're going to centralize it. My preference, even in the early stages, is to even have, if I had to, a paper-based inquiry log. Now, you don't have to do that because it's on sheer volume, that's a real problem. But I would want to be absolutely certain that Property Suite contains all of the sales inquiry, and I mean every fucking last skerrick of it. But in some instances, you've got cases where salespeople are conducting open for inspections and forgetting to push all that data into Property Suite. Is that true?
Yeah.
Here's a classic example. You've just done the home show and you're trying to fucking chase the data.
Yeah.
So what we have to do is at some stage create a moratorium where there's a distinction. So if data does not go into the inquiry log, one of my favorite tricks is when a property is listed, I'll say, well, where's the inquiry? How come it's not in Property Suite? And if they say, oh, I just forgot to put it in, I say, well, then we can't recognize that as one of your listings. Why? Because you failed to put the data in there. I'm fucking ruthless with that because there has to be, the data has to be centralized. I mean, let me give you this analogy. I'm fascinated that real estate companies, I mean, how much of the owners' money and the company's money, in your case, the majority of the company's money, is spent trying to generate inquiry? Well, from the numbers you guys gave me, the company's spending about 600,000 shortfalls, so 800 all up is being spent only 200's being recovered that we're spending in generating this inquiry, yet we can't put our fucking hands on it. That's ridiculous. So we're spending all this money to generate it and we're doing fuck all with it. That is insanity. All good?
Yeah, yeah.
All right. So once we've got, so this is what happens with the sellers. Now, once the sellers have been out there, they've attended open homes, they're ringing on signs, they're inquiring off the internet, that sort of thing. Once they're satisfied through their own research that the value of their property is greater than or equal to the amount of money they need or want, they then enter the second phase. And the second phase is the presentation phase. They go from being totally unreceptive to any contact to an agent to being totally receptive. They're like, yeah, come on down. If you ring them in there in the presentation phase, they can't wait to fucking get you down. Can you come down this afternoon? Can you come tomorrow? Because now they want to see agents because they believe it's all possible. It can all happen. Yeah?
Yeah.
This, of course, represents a period where the agent gets down, and if they give information or they give an opinion that conflicts with their opinion of value, they fucking lose them. This is where I come in, because I say to them, don't argue on price. Price, you can't win that argument. So stay away from it. But I'll explain that to you on another day. But what we know is that if you go in, and we know that once they've gotten past that presentation phase, so somewhere between 4 and 12 week mark, they're receptive. And if you go in and you're just running simple sales trainer dialogue, you can harvest those sellers out. But here's the thing. You can't harvest the sellers out if you actually don't have the data. So you've got a company, you're desperately trying to track the results of the home show, but you're at the mercy of the salespeople giving you the information they want you to have and don't want you to have. So at the moment, if they've got 2 people out of there that are dead set sellers, they don't want to tell you who they are because they want to make it look like they found them. So that way they can avoid parting with the company origin. Do you see what I mean? When in fact they should part with the company origin because the company paid for that home show to create that fucking inquiry.
Well, yeah, exactly. That's what the email was, in a nice way.
You see my point?
Mm.
And or even worse, we can't service them. So if the salesperson's not servicing them, and we're not servicing them because we don't know who they are, we're actually creating a degenerative relationship with that customer because no one's fucking back in contact with them because everyone's preoccupied with who owns the inquiry. See the nonsense of it all?
Yeah.
Yep. Anyway, so you just run that simple dialogue, and I'll get to that later. But here's the most fascinating part. If we've got the data, if we can identify these sellers, we need to build inside, because there's a period, and you would know what I'm talking about here. You've probably got several salespeople that have been down, they've run a listing presentation, but now their sellers are in the selection phase. They haven't made a choice of agent. And that can sometimes take anything from 0 to 4 weeks before they make a choice of agent.
Yeah.
Now, all that happens from the perspective of the seller during that phase is they just get lots of phone calls. And those phone calls are almost desperate because the salespeople aren't at the stage of offering anything of value. It's almost like, you ready? You ready? When are you going to put it on? Fucking, hey, you're not thinking of going with the other guys, are you? All that sort of bickering and bullshit stuff. So what I aim to do is I say that during this phase, what the seller is doing is assessing and validating the value that they're going to get from each of the agents they may have interviewed. You with me?
Mm-hmm.
So they might be looking, Ray White are cheaper. They've got a cheaper fee. Or they might go down the road. They're going, I don't know. What's that other company? First National.
Yeah.
They're giving me the marketing and blah, blah, blah. So what we have to do is run what I call reinforced product marketing. Now, here's all the things that I try to get the salespeople to do, but my preference is that we control it at the company level.
All right.
So I say there's passive contact and direct contact. Direct contact is when the agents are ringing them up during the selection phase and saying, how you going with it? Are we almost ready to go? That can become overbearing. It can actually reach a point where it pisses the seller off because it's badgering. So, you know, they might go, and the worst thing that can happen is the client says, listen, Paul, don't call us, we'll call you. So now the salesperson's in a really awful position, because if I call them, I'm going to piss them off. And if I don't call them, it might look like I've lost interest.
Yeah.
And that's come because I've called them too much. So that's direct contact. I do want them to directly contact them, but I don't want them to overdo it. So what I put in place is what I call passive contact. And passive contact is offering something of value and or reinforcing your product and its marketing. So one example of this would be the property seller's research guide. So if that was not sent to them before the presentation, no big deal, I'll send it to them after it. So it just comes out, it's passive, it's good contact, it's good information, but you actually aren't calling the people and driving them crazy. Another form is sending them SMS texts. So your company's doing, you know, more than a sale a day in some instances. So twice a week, each of those people that are in abeyance, that are in the selection phase, should be receiving SMS texts about you guys making sales and moving people on, particularly if those texts are centric to satisfying motive. For example, you know, McDowell Professionals does it again. Mr. and Mrs. Johnson successfully move down to Taupo in a timely fashion under terms and conditions that blew them away. Now, if I'm receiving that and I'm seeing twice a week you're making sales, again, that's passive contact. That's evidence of you doing great things, and the agent's not following me up. The next thing, and this is why it's really good, if you've got accolades. So you've got recommendations from clients that have sold properties, maybe once a week or once a fortnight, we send out an accolade about that particular salesperson saying, you know, look at Paul, he just did this and he just did that. And they're seeing it because it's coming from the company. That sort of sets it up nicely as well. We want to send to them the market roundup, which tells them what's going on in the market, what properties are sold for over the course of a month. And we want to send them information on buyers. So there's like 7 or 8 contact points, passive contact points that I've identified that just need to be put into a process and sent over and over again that can have the overall effect. If McDowell's ended up being, after the presentation, 3rd on the list as a choice, if we're doing all that clever reinforced product marketing whilst they're assessing and validating, it can jockey us from 3rd place into 1st place.
Yeah.
Especially if the competitors are doing not much more than just badgering them with contact follow-up.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what we want to do, what I want you to do, is to take control over this at every stage. It's going to take us a while to do it, but first of all, we want to control the data collection phase. Then we want to control the harvesting of prospects and how that's done. Then we want to control, after the presentation, the reinforced product marketing. If we do this, we are on fire. All good?
Makes total sense. Awesome.
I usually do.
I know. Funny that.
Yeah.